What is up, everybody in the digital asset space? Solomon here. We have an awesome interview today for you all. I've got Christian Hasker, who is the Chief Marketing Officer of Hedera Hashgraph. I've been waiting for this for a while. Just as a disclaimer, if you see any crypto ads on this video or on any YouTube videos that you watch stating if you send a certain amount of crypto that you will get more in return, that is a scam. Please do not participate in that. So how you doing, Christian?
I'm doing great, thank you. And thank you for having me on today. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. So I've been waiting for this for a while. After announcing that, I don't know if you've ever heard the term Hederians, but the Hederian, the Hederian digital asset team, you know, all the HBAR guys out there in the crypto sphere were all over me with questions. So I've got a laundry list of questions for you.
It's a great community. There's a little bit of a poll going on right now if it should be Hederians, Hederians, something else. And I know they've welcomed you warmly into the Telegram group. So thank you very much. Should I call you Ryan on this? King Solomon? What do you want?
Please don't call me King Solomon. Ryan's fine. Solomon's fine. That's fine.
Okay, cool.
All right, so I guess just getting into this a little bit, you know, a brief overview. I mean, I'm curious how long you've been in the blockchain space, and if you could give us a little bit of your background, when you got started with Hedera, how long you've been interested in crypto.
Yeah, so I got involved with Hedera before it was Hedera. So after the Hashgraph white paper was published, at the time, I had a marketing consulting company after I left DataStax, which is a distributed database that came out of Facebook. So distributed ledgers are sort of a next evolution of distributed databases and share some of the same tenets. So I have a very strong enterprise software background, been in the space, mainly databases for longer than I care to admit, more than 20 years. So I was introduced to the Hashgraph consensus algorithm white paper fairly early on. I knew a lot of engineers out of Facebook and Instagram. A good friend of mine took a look at the paper. He said, I have no idea if this is going to be successful, but what Lehman has solved with distributed consensus is amazing. And
yeah.
You know, from a technology perspective, you know, it's really sound, and I trust him a lot. So I got introduced to the parent company at the time, which is Swirls, and Manson Lehman, who are the co-founders of Swirls and Hedera, and they needed help putting together a go-to-market and an announcement for the public ledger built on Hashgraph consensus algorithm, which became Hedera. So I got involved in late 2017, had no intention of working full-time for Hedera because I was really happy consulting and doing my thing. But this is
funny how things turn out, isn't it?
I kept saying no. I kept saying no, and then finally, you know, some opportunities are too good to turn down, and
yeah,
this is one.
I did a little digging into you too. I mean, I see that you're bilingual. You can speak French.
I can. I lived for a couple of years in my youth in France, and had a great time. Worked on golf courses and ski resorts, and yeah, there are days where I wish I could go back and do that for sure.
I'm sure, especially right now, maybe with everything that's going on in the world. But I know we're all tackling what's going on together. So, okay, so we've all heard the promise as to what Hedera is going to bring to the table as far as third generation public ledger. Can you just provide a brief overview of the 4 network services that Hedera provides? And from what I see, that's consensus, cryptocurrency file service, and smart contracts. And I know you guys are tackling the micro payments as well.
Yeah, so happy to dig into all of that. So the first thing to understand about Hedera is it is a public ledger. It is a public network, but it is not a blockchain. So it achieves a lot of the same outcomes as a blockchain, but it is built on the Hashgraph consensus algorithm. So Hashgraph is incredibly fast, efficient, very secure. There's a math proof showing how it achieves asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerance, which is the highest degree of security. And so the Hashgraph consensus algorithm is at the bottom of the network stack. And on top of that network stack are services, as you talked about. So we have, first of all, the cryptocurrency service, which does all the things that you expect a cryptocurrency service to do: have accounts, send HBARs between entities, come to consensus on the balance of those accounts. And that enables a whole host of applications. Two other services that I'll touch on briefly and then sort of discard are the file service and the smart contract service. So the original idea was to use Solidity smart contracts, which is the Ethereum programming language for smart contracts, and have a service on top of Hedera, which allows you to use Solidity just the same way that you would on Ethereum and port those Solidity smart contracts to Hedera. However, because it's not natively built on Hashgraph, it doesn't inherit some of the great properties of Hashgraph, which are the speed and low latency, finality, and some of those scalability elements. So it's definitely good for people to, if you understand how to program on Ethereum and you want to get started with Hedera, you can just deploy your smart contract, see how it works. The file service, Hedera is, unlike blockchains, does not store all of the transaction history on chain. So it's not economically feasible to use Hedera as a file service, but there are some small files, types of files that you may want to store on there, and we have people doing that. But again, let's discount those, because the game-changing functionality on Hedera is this other service, which is the Hedera consensus service. So what that really enables is it exposes directly the Hashgraph consensus algorithm to developers and allows them to build at the speed of Hashgraph anything they want. And I know that's kind of mind-boggling to say anything they want, but we can get into some of those use cases. So since we announced it late last year, I think in, I don't know when it was, July, August sometime, and then we brought it to market in March of this year, and we're just seeing tremendous enthusiasm and adoption of that service.
That's awesome. You touched on it a little bit, but can you explain almost in layman's terms for people, because I try to keep things as simple as possible. I'm not a tech guy for sure. I try to look at what these institutions are doing and try to follow them and make moves accordingly. Can you just explain maybe basically what are the basic differences between blockchain and Hashgraph? And I know you touched on it a little bit, but.
Yeah, so all distributed ledger technologies, their main purpose is to have a set of nodes that come to consensus on transaction history and order. That's what they do. They take transactions, make sure they're valid, put them into order. So the way that blockchain does that is through the mining process, which is a set of computers which have to process, algorithms and solve puzzles, cryptographic puzzles, to compete to take a block of transactions and put it into the blockchain. And, that in its day was, incredibly groundbreaking. We should not undermine anything that blockchain has done, and it still has its place, and it is a fantastic technological evolution. But because of the way that it comes to consensus, it is designed to be slow and methodical and somewhat inefficient, because if you are competing for the block and you don't win, your branch just gets pruned off and it's done and dusted. So all that compute power went to nothing in the end.
Yeah.
But it achieves its goal, but it's slow.
Mm-hmm.
So what Lehman Baird solved with Hashgraph was, how can you do distributed consensus in the most efficient way possible and still maintaining security? So the Hashgraph is, you pick a node at random. So a node is just a computer in the network.
Mm-hmm.
Pick a node at random. You tell that node what you know, who you learned it from, and when you learned it. And then it relies on this thing called gossip. And so gossip, just like you and I tell each other a secret, you're going to tell your friend tells your friend. Like, it is a very efficient way. And all DLTs rely on some gossip protocol to really flow information through the network. But because every node learns what every other node knows, when they know it and who they know it from, you can actually discard the data. So every node is really efficient, always processing these transactions.
So it eliminates redundancy inherently.
Correct. It is.
Okay.
So could someone else invent something similar to Hashgraph? Absolutely. But Lehman says it is pushing the bounds of what is mathematically possible in a distributed system.
Mm-hmm.
So someone couldn't come out with something that is, faster and more secure.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. All right, let me see here. Okay, so you did touch base a little bit on Ethereum. I want to move to Hyperledger, and kind of a dual question here. So as far as competition is concerned with Hedera, what do you see as far as interoperation is interoperability is concerned with other initiatives? Because I know that you guys have an initiative going on with Hyperledger where pluggable consensus is now available through Hyperledger Fabric, I believe.
Yeah. So when I said you can use that Hedera consensus service for anything you can think of, there's an application for Hedera consensus service. One of those things, and IBM, by the way, is a governing council member of Hedera.
Yes.
And so they are behind Hyperledger Fabric,
yep,
as you just mentioned, which is a toolkit for building permissioned ledgers. So you'll see lots of consortiums that use Hyperledger Fabric. And that is a permissioned network that all these members in the network have to stand up and run their nodes. And additionally, they have to stand up these things called ordering nodes, which, if you remember what I said about distributed ledger systems, is the way that you receive these transactions, put them in order, and then send them back. So pluggable consensus, what that means is you can use Hyperledger Fabric with the Hedera consensus service and not have to stand up your own ordering nodes. So you don't have to trust these people over here in the consortium. You plug into this public network. Hedera does consensus for you, does the ordering service for you,
mm-hmm,
and you get the trust of the public network. So you don't have to worry about trust over here. The problem with these private ledger systems is they're private. You as the public can't see into them. So how do you trust them? Well, they're now inheriting their trust from this public network. So
yeah, I know,
if you extend that, you talked about interoperability. So
mm-hmm,
now you can use Hedera consensus service to connect two Hyperledger Fabric consortia together, or running different networks. It doesn't matter what networks you're running, you can still use Hedera consensus service in between and make sure that you're all coming to consensus on the data, the state, and that becomes incredibly powerful and flexible.
Yeah, I know. I believe Interledger Protocol, which was obviously a Ripple initiative initially, plugs into Hyperledger Fabric as well for more of a value agnostic type thing. But it's interesting to see how everything's going to be coming together. As far as I believe, interoperability is huge. And
Oh, I lost you here for a second.
oh, can you
Hold
hear
on,
me?
I'm gonna change my network real quick. Okay. Sorry, I
We
lost
good?
you. I lost you just for like 10 seconds there. But I agree. I think um, decentralized technologies are all about sharing this data, this view of the world. So it's no good if you build an isolated system. It's got to connect
Yeah.
to something
Yeah,
else.
you can't. We've been in silos for a very long time, and we're moving away from that at this point, I believe. Now, I did want to get into this a little bit because this has been brought up many times as far as blockchain's concerned, and the threat of quantum computing, because we all know that quantum computing is I don't want to say fast approaching, but it's approaching. And is there any concern from the way that Hedera operates from a quantum computing standpoint that may affect the network at all?
No, none whatsoever. So elements of Hashgraph are already post-quantum. And there's good blog post on this actually from our cryptographer explaining this whole situation, because when Google and IBM had that little back and forth about quantum computing a few months ago, this question came up quite a bit. The short answer for non-technical people is no, there are elements that are already post-quantum resistant. There are contests going on to come up with new hashing algorithms and cryptography. And the way that Hedera is designed is when those new algorithms are available, we'll just switch out to those literally overnight. No one else will see it. And Lehman is incredibly paranoid about security. So what we use today is what is used by the most, highest degree of security by government systems, and it goes beyond what is, really even necessary today, because he is super paranoid about security.
Okay, so thank you for answering that, by the way, because I was actually curious about that too. Moving on to, I know you talked about the way that the transactions are verified and it removes a redundancy. Can you touch base real quick again, just, if there was to be an audit process that occurred, obviously with blockchain, you've got a ledger, you can verify all the transactions. How would the audit process work if Hedera's transactions were to be audited?
Yeah, so that is a great question. So I talked about how the actual transaction data is not stored in the hash graph. The hash graph updates the state all the time. We are working on, and in the future, we'll deploy something called a state proof. So you can generate out of Hedera a state proof. You can take that state proof to a court of law, and it will show you, what happened, when it happened, which is most important, like the irrefutable timestamp of that. So, if you have to prove in a court of law that you filed your taxes before midnight, you generate this state proof, and you could take it and say, hey, the IRS got it wrong. They processed it wrong on their side. I generated it at this time. But it still doesn't have the underlying transaction history, because it's inefficient to store all this data, right? The data grows massive and massive and massive. So we have this concept of what are called mirror nodes. And mirror nodes watch everything that is happening. Anyone can run a mirror node, by the way. You could today stand up a mirror node. It watches everything that's happening on the network, and you can choose to store all of the transaction history. Or if you're running an application, you're just interested in your own application's history, data. So you can download that data and store that data. And then you can do analytics on that data, and you can serve it back up to your customers, any way you want. So the mirror node ecosystem is actually an interesting business model in and of itself. Because what we say to the community is, you choose what you want to store, and you can verify that it's always the truth via the network. So other people can query 1 mirror node, 2 mirror nodes, 3 mirror nodes, and they should always get back the same result. If they don't get back the same result, then that 1 mirror node is lying to you, and you shouldn't trust it.
Okay. Hey, shout out to Lionel in the XRP community for that question. That was a good one. Okay,
these are all great questions, by the way. So thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, well, I did a little bit of digging. Well, a lot of bit of digging yesterday and today. So, and I'm familiar with you guys. I participated back in the testnet. I think it was probably 8 or 9 months ago. As far as who do you see as the main competitors to what Hedera is doing right now? Because I know, like, I'm big into the XRP community as well. That's probably where most people know me. I know that Ripple has the micropayments initiative Coil, but I also know that you guys have the one of the same initiatives. So who do you see as competitors to what you're doing? Or is it maybe not so much as competitors and you're all trying? Because it seems to me like when I actually dig into blockchain, there's all these like sister relationships. Like, I don't want to say sister, but like everybody's kind of working together, but kind of competing.
Yeah, there's a phrase, co-opetition, right? So we're in competition, but you're cooperating. And, we do events and we team up with other ledgers, other systems, all the time, because, everyone that's in this brand new cutting edge, game-changing space should really be applauded for what they're trying to do. Everyone is going about it a little bit differently. At Hedera, you'll never hear us talk negatively about another project ever.
Which is great.
We're experts in Hedera. I'm not an expert. I don't work for them in these other systems. So, I can just give a zoomed out view, and you should get, other people on your program to talk about this.
Yeah, for sure.
The real competition, and this was asked actually of our co-founder Mance on the last community town hall, is centralization. It's the status quo. It's the single cloud that you deploy your application in. Not because, that's necessarily the only way to do that, but it is what has all the momentum today. So people have just a lack of knowledge. And that's why shows like this are so important, because, forget about which system you end up using. Decentralization is the future. It makes no sense to trust a single entity with everything you have and let that single entity profit from you without you being able to profit from what they're profiting in. It makes no sense. So we have this unfair playing field today, right? Where these giant corporations make so much money off of you. They give you a service which you value, no question, whether it's your email or your social network or whatever it is. But there's a new way coming to do all these that is a much fairer way and will allow us all to really participate in this ecosystem.
What I think is interesting is that sometimes even in the, in the digital asset and crypto space, we all talk about decentralization and everything else, but sometimes we get siloed in our own little communities and talk about the network effect just of our project. But what really, I think what you're describing and what I think is important is building out an ecosystem from a blockchain, a hash graph, a distributed ledger technology standpoint, to the point where multiple initiatives create that network effect and cause that tipping point where adoption actually occurs.
Yeah. Like today, if you were to, spin up an application for, your own thing, you would pick a cloud provider out of the gate, right? You just think, oh, I'll go to AWS, I'll go to Microsoft Azure, or I'll go to Google Cloud. Those are your three choices, and they have so much momentum. You'd be foolish today to say, no, I'm going to stand up my own servers and host my own servers and build it in my own data center. That people would look at you and say, Ryan, you're crazy for doing that. Just use this cloud service. Yeah. We as an industry in the distributed ledger space over the next years have to get to that point where anyone says, oh, you'd be an idiot not to use a decentralized technology for this. Of course, you've got to use a decentralized technology, but that takes so much education as an industry to educate, this market.
Now, I know that you did discuss, the Hedera as the base layer. And even if you go right to your guys' main website, you coined the phrase, the trust layer of the internet. Can you explain what you mean by the trust layer of the internet?
Yeah, absolutely. So you have the internet, and when you are on the internet today and you are interacting with someone that you do not know very well, or someone that's purporting to be someone else, they are lying to you. When we go on the web today, we're just being lied to. At the beginning of this show, unfortunately, you had to give a warning to people not to send cryptocurrency and get double the cryptocurrency back. The internet today is not a great place. I mean, it gives us so much benefit, but it's become this kind of cesspool. You're bombarded with ads and scams, and it's not great. So the Hedera consensus service, because it can plug into anything, any centralized application today can send transactions, messages to the Hedera consensus service. It can encrypt those messages. So, it doesn't have to be that everyone can see what's happening in the messages, what they contain, but that those messages are auditable messages. So it's like this trust plus model. In a centralized system today, you just have to trust that entity. If a centralized system plugs into Hedera, now you can trust them more because you yourself can audit those transactions on Hedera. So that's what we mean by the trust layer. And there's going to be, you will see, which we're seeing today, you'll see an adoption curve of how people are beginning to use this service and then what their plans are after that. Because trusting the data, number one, is super important. And then once you trust the data, then you can get into things like fair exchange of value for that data. And so, we can talk about some of the use cases in a minute, but that's where we think this is going to go.
I think this isn't really off topic, but a little bit. I think what's going on across the board right now with what we're seeing as far as payments are concerned and settlement is concerned is there's a lot of building rails and building interconnections between these organizations so that they can fix the payment aspect. Well, first you have to fix the messaging aspect, right? Then you can fix payments, and then effectively, hopefully, you can fix settlement, right? And everything becomes a lot faster and more efficient. Okay, so moving on to transactions per second, I'm curious because I've seen so many different numbers for how fast Hedera is. I've seen 10,000, I've seen 100,000, and I've seen scalable to 500,000. Can you maybe lock down what that speed is and how fast that finality occurs? I've seen 3 to 5 seconds, and I've seen 2 seconds. So,
yeah. So I'll take the finality one afterwards. So the 250,000, 500,000. What you are seeing with those numbers is pure Hashgraph consensus. So that bottom layer, how fast can the Hashgraph consensus algorithm process transactions and come to consensus? But remember, Hedera has services built on top of the Hashgraph consensus algorithm. So you have to then ask, well, how fast can those services process transactions? So these network services today, the cryptocurrency service and the Hedera consensus service are at 10,000 transactions per second today. But that is throttled. We are throttling that. We're throttling it for security and cost reasons, basically, because we don't need to scale beyond that today.
Okay.
File service and the Solidity smart contract service way slower, way slower. So we talked earlier, you want to be building at the speed of Hashgraph. So when we need to ease up on the throttle and go beyond 10,000, we can go beyond 10,000. And Lehman and the engineering team are tuning it all the time, and they're pretty confident, that they'll be able to scale that up. But the other really beautiful thing is, in the future, when we need to, we can go into what is called sharding.
Yeah.
And sharding, for your audience that don't understand what that means, is basically you have these sort of parallel networks, and account numbers from 1 to 1 million might be in this shard, from 1 million to 2 million will be in this shard, and then in this shard. And the way that Lehman has solved that is that will scale linearly. The more shards you add, it's just this very predictable, scalable curve. So, it sounds crazy to think, but you could scale to whatever you want. 1 trillion transactions per second, no problem. When the world needs it, Hedera can scale to that.
Great. Okay, so I know.
Oh, and then finality, by the way, finality. So you have nodes distributed all around the globe. So what consensus finality means is, when I send my transaction, how fast does the network come to consensus? And I know for sure that my transaction has been accepted by the network.
Mm-hmm.
Now, physics, because it's got to travel a long way, just dictate there's a certain limit to what can happen. And we're so efficient, we happen, like I said earlier, what is mathematically possible, we're pushing the boundaries of that. So it can vary depending on, different processing times and nodes and things like that, from about 2 to 5 seconds. That's what we're seeing, which is, by the way, a little bit faster than today when you go into your favorite coffee shop and swipe your credit card, your Visa. Yeah. We're a little bit faster on knowing that that transaction is final than Visa. Yeah. But it's comparable.
Thank you for answering that. I appreciate it. Okay, so what, if anything, besides some sort of pending regulatory apocalypse, would cause Hedera to potentially fail? So I have seen past interviews with you. I know that you guys are very well funded. But do you see any risk in failure?
Well, I'm glad you talked about regulations, because I think it's a lesser threat now, by the way.
I agree.
Regulations are coming that, just this week, right? Banks can now hold crypto. Is, a year ago,
that was unheard of. Yeah. Brian Brooks is in the OCC making moves.
So, and then you hear about, digital dollar, and, all these things are really good for decentralized systems. So, how could we fail? Honestly, I think before we went live, Lehman had drawn up on the whiteboard and developed something which was amazing. Everyone knew it was amazing, but taking that to a real working system is, a different proposition altogether. So I was definitely like crossing my fingers, like, will this really work in real life? And you said you participated in that testing program. We learned so much in that. It was fantastic. So technologically wise, I am not, worried at all. I was honestly very skeptical. Could we persuade global enterprises?
Oh, I lost you.
Oh, do you have me back?
We're good. Okay. Yeah, you're back.
So I was very skeptical about, can we persuade these global institutions to come and govern the network, to be co-owners of a network? And for those in your viewing right now, persuading an enterprise to do this is kind of an outrageous proposition, right? When you are not proven, they have their reputations at stake. They're putting everything on the line. They have to run a public node in a network. So I was worried, would people really go for this? And we're seeing, yes, we're at 15 council members today and some really, fantastic industry leading names. So, I believe that we're over our two hurdles now. I mean, we could fail in that we're not the most widely adopted, network out there. That would feel like a failure. But it's not a failure like some of these networks that were around a couple of years ago and just aren't around anymore. I just don't see that happening. And I don't see us not being widely adopted because it's so easy and cost efficient to adopt Hedera. It's a no-brainer value proposition. So I'm more bullish by the day, but you should discount everything I say on that because I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. I'm betting my career on Hedera. So, that might be a good thing to ask some people in the community, actually. How could Hedera fail?
Yeah. Okay, so I know you can't, directly talk about price predictions, but can you at least describe how the HBAR token, it's a coin, it's not a token. But how the coin fits into the utilization of the technology that could necessitate HBAR tokens to have value in the future?
Yes. So again, no price predictions here, but so we call it a coin, but at the end of the day, it is a utility token. So just like in a way, if you spin up your application in Amazon Web Services, you buy a bunch of credits from Amazon Web Services. And every time you do an API call to one of their services, you pay, one of these credits. So that's how it operates. But it has two purposes. It is used to pay for API calls on the network. And because we're a proof of stake system, it is used as a security mechanism for the safety and integrity of the whole network. So we're on this path to become fully decentralized. Full decentralized means anyone can spin up a node and run a node on the network completely permissionless. And we've got some phases to get there. When you do that, the proof of stake system is incredibly important. How do you keep these nodes honest? The community will proxy stake HBARs to different nodes. They will participate in the rewards. The nodes will, participate even more handsomely in those rewards. So it's the sort of socioeconomics of maintaining the safety of the overall system. That's the other purpose for HBAR.
Okay.
And then, on top of that, I'm sure people are going to come up with, new ideas and new ways to leverage it. But that was how it was conceived for these dual purposes.
Okay, I have a two-part question, I guess. The first one would be, you talked about proxy staking. I know that's coming soon. Do we know when proxy staking is going to be out and available to participate in?
We do not know. And the reason that we don't know is we really don't need it to get today because the governing council runs the initial set of nodes on the network. So we're not at that phase where it is permissionless yet. However, it is logical to think that we will start testing out proxy staking before we reach that phase because you want to make sure everything works. But I can't give you a time frame. The second phase of our decentralization, though, is when we go beyond our initial 39 council members running nodes, we'll do KYC nodes. So other businesses can run a node, but they have to be fully KYC'd on the network. And that's phase two. It's logical to think at that phase, we'll start testing, proxy staking.
Okay. All All right. So I know, can you discuss circulating supply? I know right now, what there's 50 billion total, total coins, total HBARs. Can you discuss why is there only 10% right now? I did find a document stating that by 2025, you guys will get into like the mid 30%, I believe, as far as in circulation. Can you discuss the thought process behind that?
Sure. So on hedera.com, you can download the coin economics paper. It talks about how HBAR is used on the network, and it shows the distribution schedule. So this is very important for regulatory compliance, by the way. So what the regulators look at is, does the network demand for a utility token match its supply? And there's no algorithm to, there's no rule that they give you, but if we came out with 25 billion of those tokens at open access, that's crazy. So we have this very slow ramp over the first 5 years, and we'll end up, I believe you're right, about 34%, so just over a third of tokens in the market. And those are all the HBARs that are contractually obligated by Hedera to be put into the market. Everything else, so the rest of the 2/3 of treasury is decided, the use of those tokens is decided by the governing council. So if we see adoption of the network just hit a hockey stick curve, they can decide to release those tokens more quickly into the market. So I do understand the community at a whole, the DLT community looks at us and you're like, wow, you've got a lot of tokens sitting in treasury and not a lot of supply in the market. Why? You're kind of one of the only networks that does that. And we're like, yeah, but we got a plan and we're following the plan. And what we're seeing is, over time, these releases into the market, they become a lower percentage of what's already there. So they're having less effect. And okay, we expect that to continue.
You did talk about the governing council. I'm curious, how do companies that own and govern, such as Google, LG, Deutsche Telekom, how do they contribute to projects? Are they testing proof of concepts? Do they contribute to the workforce / DevOps? Do they help in the construction of? Do they help in the construction of the technical concepts? I'm sure that's not an easy. I'm sure it's different depending on what governing council member you're talking about, but
it is. It definitely is. So I think our governing council members can sort of be put into two distinct buckets. So you have like an IBM and a Google that they sell technology and they are interested in the Hedera technology as it pertains to what they can take to market. So we talked about the consensus service with IBM used in conjunction with Hyperledger Fabric. They have a blockchain as a service called IBM Blockchain Platform. So mm-hmm. that can be used with Hedera Consensus Service. Solves a big pain in the market for them. Google, they want to sell their cloud services. So just a couple of weeks ago, you can do a one-click deployment of a mirror node using their cloud marketplace. So that's great for developers. And it's logical to think that over time, we'll see other things coming which will help their overall business. And then you have users of the technology. Wipro is also another enabling council member. So Wipro is a giant IT services company, right? They work with the biggest enterprises in the world, developing applications and running those applications for these large enterprises. And, Hedera is a technical differentiator for them. They're working on some really interesting projects with different customers of theirs, you know, excited to talk about those in the future when we can. And then you have users of the technology. So you have like a Tata Communications that
Tata's a giant as well.
Massive, massive. They have a whole host of, and I mean, there is a blog post about some of their ideas, but so I'm not saying anything that, you know, they haven't already said. But, you know, for example, they're very interested in decentralized identity on top of Hedera. That solves a lot of pains for them. We announced Avery Dennison a couple of weeks ago. They're the, you know, labeling company. They're big into RFID. You know, in the future, they'll be talking about what they're doing on the network as well. And then you do have a couple of council members who are watching and waiting to see how the overall space, and they want that front seat in seeing the market, learning the market, governing a public network, and learning from that. But you talked about DevOps. So every council member has to run a node in the network, stand that node up, staff that node, run that node, make sure that node is always available. So they're committing, you know, a lot of resources to do that. And then they participate in different committees on the council. So one is a technology and product committee. So they govern the roadmap, prioritize the features. We will be open sourcing those services, you know, fairly shortly. And then after that, we will do open review of the consensus algorithm itself. When we hit those two milestones, we'll actually start accepting pull requests from the developer community. And so this committee will now have to also take these inputs from externally and decide how to prioritize these features. So that's a big deal as well. And then there are other committees, you know, there's a marketing committee that I chair, and that's really, you know, how do we want to market Hedera? What do we want to talk about? What's our messaging? So there's a regulatory and legal committee. You know, DLA Piper is one of the largest law firms in the world. So obviously, you know, they're involved in that. So it's really fascinating.
All right, I'm going to move into like not the meat and potatoes, but a little bit of partnership discussion here. So I know I just saw this past week, and I presented that on my channel that Hedera partnered with FPOS. Is that the way to pronounce it?
You'd have to ask the Aussies. I believe it's FPOS. FPOS Australia, yeah.
And from looking at FPOS, I believe that's pretty huge. For those of you that aren't aware, and correct me if I'm wrong, Christian, please, but FPOS it's basically like the debit card system of Australia. It's the electronic funds transfer at point of sale, and they also use it in New Zealand. Can you expand a little bit more on what the initiative is? I saw something today about a stable coin running on that, and maybe a timeline from beginning to end, when you're supposed to start that testing through them.
Yes, so it's not the New Zealand one, by the way. Okay. It is just FPOS Australia. You are right. Here in the States, when you go to a restaurant, they don't come and bring you the point of sale machine where you put your debit card, right? They take your card and you go away. But pretty much everywhere else in the world, they come to you and you put it in. That's what FPOS does. They you know.
It's pretty much the whole. All of Australia.
It's the system all the Australians use.
Yeah.
It's, you know, got like our governing council, you know, there's I think 19 banks in Australia, you know, govern FPOS and work with that system. So for me, at least, the original promise of cryptocurrency was this fair exchange of value. So today on your YouTube channel, I can pay a subscription and do YouTube Red and not see these ads, but I'm too cheap. You know, I keep getting bombarded. I always click past it. You know, I'll watch the 5 seconds of the ad. I'll click by it, blah, blah, blah. Or, you know, you'll go to your favorite online newspaper and maybe it gives you 10 articles per month. And then it starts hitting you up for a paywall and a subscription. And personally, I have enough subscriptions of other services that I just don't do it. And the reason I don't do it is I'm not sure that I'm getting the $10 of value per month for that service. There's not this fair value exchange. So what FPOS is trialing is media micropayments. So they'll partner with news properties in Australia in this proof of concept. They'll probably stand up their own media site to show people how it works. Mm-hmm. You'll load up a wallet, maybe with $1 worth of their stable coin, which is pegged to the Australian dollar. Mm-hmm. So in your wallet, in your browser, you'll have $1 worth. And instead of hitting an ad or hitting a paywall, you'll just pay, 1 cent, half a cent, a tenth of a cent, whatever they decide, to read that article, watch that video. And so you start to get into this system of being able to navigate the web without these constant interruptions. So they're really focusing on having a seamless web experience, and they really believe this is the future. We all know how media has been undermined from having to be reliant solely on advertising revenue. Yeah. You get all the clickbait type articles to do that. So this is what FPOS is doing. They know how to process payments. That's their business. So now they're getting into the business of processing micropayments, and they're using the Hedera consensus service to do that.
That's awesome.
Timing wise, I believe the proof of concept is, imminent. Like next couple of weeks, it'll be, gearing up. I know from talking with their chief architect, they have funding for the initiative. That's why they wanted to make the announcement. Mm-hmm. And, how long it takes, I don't know. But I know from just talking with them, it's not hard because of Hedera and their experience with it already. It's not going to be hard for them to do. It'll be easy.
Okay. All right. I've got like 2 or 3 more questions here. I don't know if you're gonna be able to touch base on this one or not, but I found a document basically stating that Hedera Hashgraph, there's a prototype through the Department of Defense, U.S. Military Academy, Office of Naval Research to upgrade power grids. Can you touch base?
So I watched your video. And for everyone out there, I do believe you were the person that found that.
Yeah.
So that's great. I don't know how you found it and the digging that you did. Hedera is a public network, and it can be used in a variety of different ways. And because of the trust layer, flowing energy data through that and making it, queryable is a good use of the technology. But I don't have I promise you, I have no details or insight into that. But we do know, anecdotally, there are projects happening all over the place all the time that we're not plugged into, because being a public network, no one has to talk to Hedera. You can start building on the network today and have at it, which is cool. That's amazing to think about, but it means that we do fly blind unless someone actually reaches out to us and says, can you help us do this?
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for that. I wasn't expecting a very deep answer, but for those of you,
if you learn more about it, tell us.
For those of you listening, I mean, I did that document does state that it was a successful prototype. So I think everybody in the community would be very interested to hear, and I'm sure that you can't touch base on anything in specific due to NDAs, et cetera, but should we be expecting any announcements for trials or proof of concepts or partnerships in the near future this year?
So we continue to recruit governing council members, and it's logical to think that we will announce more governing council members. We have a goal to grow to 39. We're at 15, so we have 24 left. timing on that is all just, incredibly, I know from the outside, it's like, oh, just sign this and announce them. And, it's easy to get a partnership agreement signed. That's not the hard thing, but these aren't partnerships. They own the network. So it's like doing an acquisition. You're working with, the processes just with these companies is very long and arduous. And then once you've signed them, getting their PR teams comfortable with announcing it is another battle as well. So it's logical to think there'll be more announcements coming. And then, game-changing applications. I personally am so bullish on what I see, being built and what people are talking to us about. And again, as they become comfortable, I'd say FPOS is an outlier. They talked about something that they were about to POC on the network, which is fantastic. But that's rare. People usually build it and then talk about it. So, one of the things I'm personally excited for, they've talked about it already, is DLA Piper, the global law firm, is building a tokenization platform on the network, which will allow you initially to tokenize real estate very easily.
Oh, wow.
And that's in process. When it's finished, you can expect a lot more details about it. But there's a blog post where they talk a little bit about what they're doing already. Oh man, yeah, I'm pretty excited by some of the stuff I see. What's another one I can talk about? When you think about authentic content, how do you prove to the world that you, Ryan Solomon, created this piece of content? It's yours, it's original IP. Wouldn't it be great if you could, when you upload something somewhere, you could hash that on a public network with like a digital fingerprint? Yeah. And then prove to the world that's you don't have to prove it. They prove it to themselves, And then when you see your stuff being co-opted and repurposed by other people, it's not going to have that digital fingerprint attached to it. Yeah. So this is like the first step to, if I can authenticate content and prove objectively it's my original content, well, now I can monetize that content in different ways as well. So that's a really exciting use case for us that we'll be talking about that later this year with some real users.
That's awesome. All right, last question, Christian. So I got Kevin Cage is a pretty big guy in the XRP community too, and he wanted me to ask you what two other projects in the blockchain space that you find interesting right now besides Hedera.
I always find the original Bitcoin blockchain really interesting. So, it didn't achieve its original goal, but it has, people have written it off so many times, and to me, it's kind of made it. And, it's hard for me to say it is a store of value, but it's proven itself to be a store of value. And I think that is really interesting. And because it's the OG, I always just look at that and see, how it's doing, what I can learn from that. I think it's fascinating. And then, I'm really interested in, because they raised money around the same time as us, and early on, people that were looking at Hedera were also interested in Dfinity, because originally we were in this sort of bucket together as like the next evolution of Ethereum. I think we've evolved past that. But I think what they're trying to pull off is incredibly ambitious, right? This decentralized cloud operating system, basically. So, they're starting to make some progress. I think There was a release a couple of weeks ago for developers. How are they going to come out of the gate? That's fascinating for me. Do they see some of the, will they see the price fluctuations that we saw, which was a real interesting time? Have they figured out the token economics? Have they figured out the technology well? Will there be adoption of it? It's hard to get, you talked about network effects. You don't come out of the gate with network effects, right? It takes a long time to build these things. So I'd say, yeah, Bitcoin as the OG, and then Dfinity as something new that'll be coming to market.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Christian. Hang on here for a second after I end this, because I'll get off with you in a second too, and we can just personally do it. But there you have it, everybody. Christian Hasker, Chief Marketing Officer of Hedera Hashgraph. I really appreciate the time.